Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Usually when we sit down to talk about Christopher Nolan, I have to mentally prepare myself for a physics lesson.
Right.
We're usually talking about time dilation or dream layers within dream layers, or the terrifying intricacies of building an atomic bomb.
Yeah, the conversation is supposed to be about 70-millimeter film and IMAX cameras and these massive practical effects that, rattle your teeth.
Exactly. We expect the conversation to be about aspect ratios and sound mixing.
Oh, the sound mix.
Specifically why we can never hear the dialogue.
Right, and Hans Zimmer just leaning on a synthesizer until our ears bleed. It's usually a celebration of cinema as a spectacle.
A spectacle, that's the word. But today is very different. We are wading into a cultural firestorm that has absolutely nothing to do with the aspect ratio or the lenses.
Not at all.
We are talking about his highly anticipated upcoming film, The Odyssey. And while the buzz should be about Christopher Nolan taking on Homer's epic, which, let's be honest, sounds like the perfect match of director and material.
Oh, it really does. It sounds incredible on paper. But the real heat, as you said, is coming from somewhere else entirely.
It really is. And it's not the good kind of heat.
No, it's scorching. It's a 5-alarm fire.
It's a casting rumor that has basically set social media on fire. And we aren't just talking about a few angry tweets here. We're looking at a massive clash between film critics, industry insiders, established practices regarding diversity, and a very, very vocal segment of the audience that feels completely betrayed.
That's the key, betrayed. This isn't just about a movie casting for them. It's being framed as a battle for the soul of story. It's a perfect storm of modern cultural conflict.
How so?
Well, you have the auteur director, Christopher Nolan, you have the ancient sacred text of Western civilization, and then you have the modern machinery of Hollywood identity politics crashing right in.
It's the kind of story that, it starts with people zooming in on a blurry trailer screenshot, and it ends with a debate about collective guilt and corporate mandates.
That is barely an exaggeration. The stakes have been raised incredibly high by the people involved in this conversation on all sides.
So here is our mission for today. We are going to unpack this specific controversy involving the alleged, and I have to emphasize, alleged casting of Lupita Nyong'o in the Odyssey. We're going to look at the backlash from massive figures like Elon Musk, the defense mounted by film critic Richard Roeper, and then the much deeper, heavier arguments regarding DEI. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion quotas in Hollywood.
And to guide us, we have some very specific sources we're looking at. We're pulling from reports from Fandom Pulse and a detailed transcript from the Trent Report, which is hosted by John F. Trent.
And what's their angle?
Well, these outlets have documented this timeline in minute detail, and they provide a very specific viewpoint on why this backlash is happening. They argue that the mainstream narrative, the one that this is just about acting or colorblind casting, is actually, in their view, dishonest.
I have to say, I love the detective work aspect of this early on. It feels like we're solving a mystery before we even get to the philosophy, because, let's be real, has the studio actually said anything?
Well, that's the first question, isn't it?
Yeah, if I go to IMDb right now, does it say Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy?
That is the perfect place to start. Let's get into the detective work phase of this. We need to clarify, there has been no official confirmation that Lupita Nyong'o is playing Helen of Troy.
None.
No. Christopher Nolan hasn't stepped up to a podium. Warner Bros. Or Universal, whoever is handling the press, they haven't sent out the cast list confirming it explicitly in text. There is no press.
So wait, if there's no press release, is this all just smoke? Are people getting mad at a ghost? The internet is famous for getting mad at things that aren't even real.
That's a very fair question, and usually a good starting point for skepticism. But in this case where there's smoke, there's usually a raging fire.
Okay.
The sources we have point to a trail of evidence that is, it's pretty hard to ignore. It's actually a fascinating lesson in how modern fandom operates as a kind of informal.
Okay, walk me through the evidence trail. How do we get from no announcement to Elon Musk is tweeting about a director's integrity?
It all starts back in July 2025. You know how Nolan loves the theatrical experience, right? He hates streaming. He wants you in a big, dark room with a giant...
Oh, absolutely. He's the high priest of the cinema.
So he released a theater-exclusive teaser trailer.
Ah, the old exclusive trailer trick. You have to buy a ticket to another movie just to see the teaser. I remember he did that with Tenet, too.
Exactly. It creates scarcity. It creates an event. And because it wasn't just uploaded to YouTube immediately in glorious 4K, we didn't have crystal clear analysis right away.
You just had people's description.
We had people describing it on Reddit or leaking these grainy, vertical selfie videos that looked like they were filmed during an earthquake. But in that footage, there was a very distinct visual that caught everyone's eye.
And what was that?
Viewers saw Lupita Nyong'o standing next to the actor Jon Bernthal.
Okay. The Punisher himself.
The very same. Now, on its own, that's just two actors standing together in, ancient-looking costumes. Maybe they're just in the same scene. Maybe she's a goddess and he's immortal.
Right. Context is everything. It could be anything.
But the internet sleuths got to work immediately. Specifically, an analyst account known online as the Nolan Archive.
Okay, and what is the Nolan Archive? Are they reliable?
Well, this isn't just a random fan account with a blurry avatar. These guys track production schedules, set lead casting calls. They treat it like open source intelligence work. They're very serious about it.
So they're the CIA of Nolan fans.
Essentially, yes. And they analyzed the framing of the shot. They looked at the body language between Nyong'o and Bernthal. They looked at the cost and the visual language of the trailer. It depicts them as a pair, a unit.
What do you mean by that?
She isn't standing behind him like a handmaiden or a servant. She isn't, floating above him like some kind of deity. She is standing shoulder to shoulder with him, regal, wearing what appear to be royal color. It looks like a king and his queen.
Okay, so visually, the film language is telling these two are a power couple.
Precisely. That was the working hypothesis back in July. A very strong one, but still a hypothesis. Then we fast forward to November 2025.
A few months later.
Yes. And Empire magazine, the big film magazine, releases its massive print coverage of the film, the big glossy feature. And in that article, they confirm officially that Jon Bernthal is playing Menelaus.
Menelaus. Okay, let me dust off my high school mythology here. I read the Odyssey, or at least the Spark Note back in the day. Menelaus.
Yeah.
That's the king of Sparta, right?
Yeah. Correct. The king of Sparta. The red-haired king, as he's often called. And crucially for this whole story, the husband of Helen.
The face that launched 1,000 ships. The woman whose abduction by Paris starts the entire Trojan War.
The very same.
Yeah.
The historical and literary context is absolutely vital here. Menelaus is Helen's husband. Helen is abducted, or, depending on which version you read, she elopes with Paris.
And that act is the inciting incident for the whole thing.
It is the backbone of the Iliad and the entire background for the Odyssey. Without that event, there is no war. There is no story of Odysseus trying.
Okay, so let's connect the dots here. Lay it out. If Jon Bernthal is officially confirmed as Menelaus, and the trailer shows Lupita Nyong'o as his partner, standing by his side in a regal manner, looking very much like his queen.
Then the strong, almost undeniable speculation is that she is playing Helen. The Nolan Archive put it quite bluntly. The teaser strongly suggests. And since that deduction was made, the entire online discourse has proceeded as if it is a 100% confirmed fact.
The assumption is made.
The assumption is made, and the battle lines are drawn based on that assumption. The critics are operating on the idea that this deduction is absolutely accurate.
It's really amazing how a few seconds of blurry footage combined with one magazine article can lead to such a concrete, world-burning deduction.
It's modern media literacy in act, for better or worse.
But let's play devil's advocate for just a second. Let's assume they're right. Let's say she is Helen. Why does this specific role matter so much? I mean, actors get cast in movies all the time. People play roles they don't look like constantly. We have Americans playing Brits. We have people playing aliens from other planets. Why is this the line in the sand for so many?
Because Helen isn't just any character. She's a symbol. In the original source material, and in the thousands of years of art and literature that have followed it, Helen of Troy represents a very, very specific archetype. She is the most beautiful woman in the world.
That's a heavy title to carry for any actor.
It is. And for the critics who are driving this backlash, that description comes with specific historical and ethnic acts. She is a figure of Greek mythology. She is the queen of Sparta. She is, in their eyes, inextricably tied to the ancient world.
So to change her ethnicity.
To change that, in their eyes, is to rewrite the foundational text of Western literature. It's not just a casting choice. It's a revision of a cultural artifact.
Like casting, I don't know, King Arthur or something. You have a very specific mental image that is tied to centuries of folklore and history.
It's exactly like that. And that brings us squarely to the reaction. The sources we're looking at describe it as overwhelmingly negative.
Overwhelmingly negative. That's not good for the marketing department.
It's not just grumbling. It's vitriol. And it's coming from very high places, not just anonymous accounts with anime avatars.
Yeah, you mentioned Elon Musk earlier.
Yeah.
Which is wild. I mean, the guy owns the platform where most of this fighting is happening.
He does.
He usually tweets about rockets or AI or Dogecoin. What on earth did he say about a Christopher Nolan movie?
He replied to a post about the casting with a very short but very heavy sentence. He just wrote, "Chris Nolan has lost his integrity."
Oof, integrity. That's a big word. He's not saying, I don't like this casting or this looks weird. He's attacking the director's moral and artistic compass.
Precisely. It implies that Nolan has compromised his artistic vision for something else, that he has sold out to some kind of political agenda. It immediately shifts the conversation from one about aesthetics to one about ethics.
And he's not the only big name, is
Not by a long shot. We have commentary from comedian Chrissy Mayer. Her stance was even more aggressive, if you can believe it. She called the casting absolutely disgusting.
Wow. Okay, so she's not holding back. Disgusting. That seems incredibly personal.
It is, and she argues that it ruins the Odyssey. But she didn't just state her opinion. Her reasoning goes right back to the text.
What do you mean?
She didn't just complain. She actually posted screenshots and attachments of how Helen was described thousands of years ago in the original text. Her whole point is, this is a defined character. It's specific. She has a look.
Right. She's essentially saying, the author told us what she looks like. Homer gave us a description, and this ain't.
And that description, as she points out, is the epitome of ancient Greek beauty. The argument is that changing her ethnicity goes directly against the written word of the epic itself. She's saying, see, attached, it's pretty specific.
Then you have someone like Lauren Chen, another commentator, who echoed that same sentiment. She had this quote that I found really interesting, and honestly, it captures a specific feeling a lot of people seem to have. She said, when I go see a movie, I shouldn't have to be the one doing the acting.
That's a fascinating way to put it, isn't it? It frames the audience as an active participant in creating the illusion of the film.
Yeah, unpack that for me. What does she mean she has to do the act? I thought I paid $20 to sit there and eat popped watch.
She's talking about the suspension of disbelief. She's arguing that if the casting is so incongruous with the character's well-established description, if Helen of Troy, a Greek icon, is played by a Kenyan-Mexican actress, the audience has to do the mental work to pretend it fits.
She's arguing that the casting breaks the immersion. Instead of getting lost in the story, you're constantly reminded of the casting choice.
It pulls you out of the story. You stop seeing Helen of Troy and you start seeing the casting. You start thinking about the production meeting where this was decided, not the Trojan War.
That's her argument precisely. She believes the visual reality of the film should match the historical or literary expectation so the audience can just relax and get lost in the narrative. If the audience has to work to believe what they're seeing, the movie has, in her view, failed at a fundamental level.
And of course, the internet being the internet, it wasn't all just serious critique. There was mockery. I saw some wild comparisons being thrown out there.
Oh, plenty of it. The gloves came off very quickly. One user named Jodka asked sarcastically, why not Peter Dinklage as Helen of Troy?
Okay, that's a very specific and provocative image, but I get the point they're trying. It's a rhetorical device, right? Reductio ad absurdum. They're taking the logic to its most extreme conclusion. If ethnicity doesn't matter for the character, why does gender matter? Why does height matter? Why does any physical attribute matter at all?
Right. If you can change one fundamental trait, can you just change them all?
Exactly. If Helen can be black, can Achilles be a toddler? Can Zeus be a golden retriever? Where does it stop? That's the slippery slope argument they're making.
And another user compared the 2004 Troy movie to this. I remember that movie, Brad Pitt, Orlando Bloom, Eric Bana. It was a whole thing.
Yeah, huge thing. A user named David Santa Carla brought that up. He posted side-by-side images. You had Diane Kruger, who played Helen in the 2004 film.
Right.
And she is blonde, blue-eyed, very traditionally Greek statue-looking, or at least, Hollywood's version of what that is. He contrasted that image with the rumored 2026 version to visually highlight the drastic shift in representation.
So the backlash is firmly rooted in this idea of fidelity. Fidelity to history, fidelity to the text. They want the movie to look like the history book, or at least the poem.
Yes. They view the Odyssey as a heritage, a piece of Western history. And they see this casting not as a fresh artistic choice, but as a violation of that.
But not everyone agreed with this tidal wave of backlash, and this is where things get really spicy. Enter Richard Roeper.
A very well-known name in film criticism. He's been around for a long time, reviewing movies for the Chicago Sun-Times, was on TV with Ebert for a while. Big voice.
And he decided to jump into the fray and defend the casting. Or, maybe more accurately, to attack the attackers.
He did, and he tried to do it with a bit of satire. He wanted to hold a mirror up to the critics and show them how, in his view, ridiculous they were being.
This is what we're calling the it's just fiction argument.
Exactly. Roeper looked at the cast list for the Odyssey, and he picked out another very famous name, Matt Damon.
Matt Damon. Jason Bourne himself is in this movie.
He is. And Roper's tweet was just ripping with sarcasm. He wrote, and I'm quoting, "Unbelievable. American actor Matt Damon, born in 1970 of Nordic and British ancestry, has been cast in the Odyssey as the make-believe Odyssey, who is 100% Greek and was born circa 1250.
Okay, honest, that's a pretty...
It is. It's witty.
And he's got a point, doesn't he? I mean, we've been watching British actors play American presidents for decades. We watched a bunch of Americans play Soviets in Chernobyl with British accents. If we don't care about Matt Damon's Ocean's 23 end results, why is everyone losing their minds over Lupita Nyong'o? It does feel like a double standard.
On the surface, absolutely. It feels like Roeper has checkmated the angry mob with simple logic, the classic it's all make-believe defense. He's pointing out that nobody in the cast, Greek from 1200, they're all modern actors playing a part.
Right, like it's called acting. That's the literal job description. You pretend to be someone you aren't.
But this is where our sources, specifically the Trent Report, say we need to stop and look much, much closer. They argue that Roeper's tweet, while funny and clever, is actually a logical fallacy.
A fallacy?
Yes. In fact, they go even further. They call his argument feeble at best and, more pointedly, intentionally dishonest.
Intentionally dishonest? That's a really strong accusation. They are claiming he knows better. He's not just making a bad point, he's being deceptive.
Yes. They are claiming he is essentially gaslighting the audience.
So what is the rebuttal? Why doesn't the Matt Damon comparison hold water for these critics? Because again, on the surface, it seems to make perfect sense. Neither of them are actually ancient Greek.
The core argument from the critics is that Roeper is willfully ignoring the intent behind the casting. Intent. They argue that Matt Damon was cast because he's a massive movie star who can open a film, sell tickets, and is a talented actor. He wasn't cast because he's a white guy from Boston. His whiteness was incidental to his casting, not the reason for it.
Whereas they believe Lupita Nyong'o was cast because she's black.
That is the absolute heart of their argument. They argue that Roeper is ignoring the underlying cultural and societal factors that they believe are driving this specific cast. And the source material goes on to claim that Roeper is engaging in a tactic that has become, in their words, a meme of leftist discourse.
A meme, like a funny picture of a cat.
No, a meme in the original sense of the word. A repeated pattern of behavior or rhetoric. They reference a concept attributed to a figure known as millennial woke, and the phrase is pretending not to understand things, thus making discourse impossible.
Oh, that's interesting. Pretending not to understand. Break that down for me.
The accusation is that Richard Roeper knows why people are mad. He's a film critic. He's been covering Hollywood for decades. He knows about social engineering. He knows about political agendas. He knows about diversity. But he pretends that the argument is just a silly, literal-minded debate about acting lineage.
I see.
He frames it as actors playing roles to completely avoid the much more charged discussion of institutions forcing demographic.
So by stripping away the context of why the casting happened, he shuts down the actual conversation people are trying to have.
Yeah.
He makes the critics look like pedantic, racist nerds who just want DNA tests for all the actors.
Right.
When they are actually trying to argue against a political ideology, they see it play in Hollywood.
Precisely. The critics argue that you cannot compare organic casts, even if they aren't historically perfect, with what they perceive as mandated ideological cast. They see Matt Damon as a commercial choice. They see Lupita Nyong'o as a political, and for them, that's all the difference.
And this brings us right to the why. Why do they think it's political?
Yeah.
The source material is very, very clear that they believe this isn't just Christopher Nolan feeling inspired one day. They believe this is a mandate.
This is what we can call the institutionalized argument, and it centers on the corporate structure behind the film, specifically Universal Studios.
Universal is distributing the film, right? Nolan's new home after leaving Warner Bros.
Yes, and the source alleges that Universal, as a part of its parent company Comcast, has specific codified DEI quotas.
Quotas. Now, that word carries a lot of weight. We aren't just talking about we'd like to be more diverse or we encourage diverse applicants.
No, we are talking about what some insiders call the Comcast mandate, or similar corporate structures across the industry. The claim is that the studio requires a certain percentage of characters on screen, and people behind the camera, for that matter, to be non-white.
Regardless of the story being told.
According to the source, yes. Regardless of the story, the time period, or the historical setting. And this is the most controversial part of their claim. Regardless of talent, skill level, or looking the part.
It's a numbers game.
It's a numbers game. The source implies that for many major studios now, you literally cannot get your project green, meaning you don't get the money to start filming unless your casting plan satisfies a diversity scorecard.
So it's a prerequisite for doing business. It's like needing a building permit before you can start construction on a house.
That's a great analogy. And this is where the art versus commerce friction just completely explodes. If Christopher Nolan, who is arguably the most powerful and autonomous director in Hollywood, wants to make the Odyssey for hundreds of millions of dollars, even he might have to sit in a meeting where a diversity officer looks at the proposed cast list and says, Chris, this is too white. You won't get the tax incentives in California or the UK if you don't change 3 of these lead roles.
And that's the terrifying part for the purists. The idea that a spreadsheet or a corporate policy is directing the movie, not the director. The art is secondary to the policy.
That is the core of the institutionalized argument. It's not that Nolan woke up and thought, you know who would be a great Helen? Lupita Nyong'o. It's that the system he operates within makes it easier, or perhaps, as the critics claim, necessary to get the movie made if he makes that.
So the whole debate completely shifts. It stops being, can Lupita Nyong'o give a good performance in this role? And becomes, was she mandated to be in this role for political reasons?
Exact. And if the answer is yes, she was mandated, then for the critics, the film is fundamentally compromised before the first frame is even shot.
It's no longer an honest adaptation in their eyes.
It's a vehicle for a corporate ideology.
Now, usually these claims about secret quotas and mandates are dismissed by defenders as, right-wing conspiracy theories. People say, oh, you're just imagining it. Studios just want to be diverse because it sells tickets and reflects the world.
Right. That's the standard rebuttal.
But the source material brings up a very specific case study that they say proves this is real and it's happened.
To understand why the critics are so terrified of this Nolan rumor and why they're so certain about the motive, we have to look at what they consider the patient zero of this debate. Netflix's The Witcher.
The Witcher? The fantasy show with Henry Cavill, I remember that started out huge and then, well, it kind of fell off a cliff, didn't it?
It did. Spectacular. And the source points to Sophie Holland, who is the casting director for that show, as the absolute smoking gun in this entire debate.
Who is Sophie Holland? What's her significance?
She is a very prominent casting director, Kay. And the source points to an interview she gave, which was later republished by Variety, a major industry paper that is, frankly, quite explosive in this context.
Okay, walk us through the controversy there. That was about the casting of the character Yennefer Vengerberg, right?
It was. Now, the Witcher books by the Polish author Andrzej Sapkowski are incredibly specific about phenotype. It's a Polish folklore world, steeped in Slavic mythology. It's not generic Dundragon's fantasy. It has a very specific rural geography.
Right. It's like how Black Panther is steeped in a specific vision of African culture. The setting matters.
The setting matters immensely. And the character of Yennefer is iconic to fans of the books and games. In the books, she is described as the most beautiful woman in the world, with very specific features. Pale skin, violet eyes, raven black hair. It's a very particular cold beauty specific to that folklore.
And for the show, they cast Anya Chalotre, who is a talented actress of British and Indian descent.
Correct. Now, typically in a situation like that, a casting director will just say, we saw hundreds of actors, and she just gave the best audition. She was the best person for the job.
The standard line.
The standard line. But Sophie Holland did not say that.
What did
she admitted on the record that she engaged in race swapping specifically to affect change.
She said that explicitly, to affect change, not to find the best actor.
She did. I want to read the quote here because the specific wording is so important. She said, I remember saying, I feel like we need to challenge what people think of as the standard of beauty.
Challenge what people think of as the standard of beauty. That sounds like a political or a social mission statement, not a casting one.
It is. She went on to say that having a woman of color in that specific role does incredibly powerful things for the viewers at home. She specifically mentioned that fantasy worlds were, in her opinion, predominantly white, and she wanted to use her power to change that balance.
Okay, so let's pause there for a second and try to see it from her perspective. From her point of view, she's doing something noble. She's trying to broaden horizons, make the fantasy world more inclusive for more people. She thinks fantasy is too white, and she wants to fix it.
Absolutely. She believes she is using her position to make the world a better, more accepting place. She sees herself as an activist within her professional role.
But from the perspective of the critics we're discussing,
it is a confession.
A confession of what?
A confession that the casting was not about finding the person who looked most like the character in the book. It was not about fidelity to the source material. It was about social engineering.
It was a political act designed to teach the audience a lesson.
Exactly. She is implicitly saying that if you, the audience, envision a white woman as the most beautiful in a Slavic-inspired world, that is a bias, an unconscious bias, that needs to be corrected by the production.
So it turns the casting office into a re-education classroom.
And the critics point to this interview and they say, this is the playbook. This is what they're doing. They aren't adapting the story. They are trying to fix you, the viewer.
That phrase, fixing you, is powerful. It implies that the audience is broken and needs to be corrected by Hollywood.
And that is why the reaction is so hostile, so visceral. The source material uses this exact quote to say, look, we aren't crazy. We aren't imagining. They are admitting it out loud. They argued this is definitive proof that the industry is prioritizing ideological goals, specifically what the source calls anti-white sentiment over the integrity story.
That phrase anti-white appears in the source text we're looking at.
It does, explicitly. The Trent Report transcript says it's literally just being anti-white. They argue that by intentionally removing white characters from roles they traditionally or historically occupy, simply to challenge standard, the industry is engaging in active discrimination against white actors and the original European source.
This connects everything back to the broader ideological battle we mentioned at the start. We're touching on wokeism. And the sources do not shy away from using that term at all.
We absolutely are. And this is where we have to get a little philosophical, because the sources themselves do. They try to delve into the ideological roots of this kind of thing. And to do that, they cite Bishop Barron to explain what they believe is happening.
Bishop Barron, like the Catholic bishop. That's a very interesting figure to bring into a movie debate. Usually we're quoting film scholars or industry analysts.
Yeah, Robert Barron. He's a very popular commentator on culture and faith, and he has a huge online following. In 2021, he gave a very clear explanation of what he calls woke ideology that the sources are now using to frame this entire Odyssey debate. It provides the intellectual framework for their aim.
So what was his take? How does a bishop explain Hollywood casting controversy?
He explained that, in his analysis, advocates of this ideology focus less on the individual and more on racial and ethnic categories.
So identity politics. You aren't John, you are white male. You aren't Jane, you are black female.
Right. Your group identity is your primary identity. And because they view all of history through the lens of power dynamics and oppression between these groups, they endorse the idea of collective guilt.
Collective guilt, meaning you are held responsible or guilty, not because of what you personally did, but because of what your identity group did in the past.
Exactly. If your ancestors were, in their view, oppressors, you carry that historical weight. And to fix that past injustice, the ideology recommends what he calls reverse discrimination.
So treating people differently based on their race now to balance out how people were treated differently based on their race in the past. It's the idea of equity instead of equality.
That's the definition Bishop Barron provides. And the critics of the Nolan casting see exactly this playing out on the silver screen. They don't see Lupita Nyong'o as just an actress getting a gig.
They see her casting as an act of this reverse discrimination.
Yeah. They argue that Nolan, or more likely, the studios participating in this ideology, they're prioritizing the category, we need a black woman in a lead role to balance the historical scales over the individual. Is this specific actress the most accurate and best choice?
And this brings us right back to the Matt Damon art. This is why Richard Roeper's snappy comeback completely fails.
Exactly. In their view, Matt Damon wasn't cast to teach the audience a lesson about masculine beauty standards. He wasn't cast to challenge unconscious bias against Bostonians.
Right.
He wasn't cast to atone for the sins of ancient Greece. He was just cast because he's Matt Damon and people like to watch him fight things in movies. It was a business.
The intent, again, makes all the difference. One is seen as commercial, the other is seen as corrective and ideological.
That's the absolute crux of it. The critics see the intent behind Nyong'o's casting as hostile. Hostile to the source material, hostile to history, and hostile to the audience's legitimate expectations. They feel like they're being lectured to rather than entertained.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah.
It really turns a trip to the movies into a political stance. You can't just buy a ticket anymore. You're effectively casting a vote with your wallet.
It really does. And looking at the conclusion of this specific online skirmish, it wasn't pretty for Richard Roeper.
The source says he was roasted.
Thoroughly, completely ratioed, as they say. The attempt to mock the outrage backfired spectacularly because, in the critics' view, he refused to engage with the institutionalized argument. By ignoring the DEI quotas, by ignoring the Sophie Holland quotes, he looked like he was dodging the real.
So that tactic of pretending not to understand.
The sources claim that the tactic of saying, it's just a movie, you guys need to relax, is losing its effect. They believe people see through it now and aren't buying it anymore.
So what does this all mean for the movie itself? I mean, let's get down to the bottom line. It's the Odyssey. It's Christopher Nolan. The man did Oppenheimer. He did Inception. He turns physics homework into global blockbusters. This thing is going to make $1 billion, right?
You would think so. And the source material readily admits that. They say it is Christopher Nolan plus the Odyssey, so it will likely do well. Nolan has a massive amount of goodwill built up with audience.
But I sense a but coming.
But there's a big caveat. The source suggests it might underperform. It might not do as well as it could have.
Because a significant number of people will just stay home in protest.
Because the anger is real and it's widespread, the source notes that people are really not. If you alienate a core demographic, the people who love history, the people who love the classics, the people who are just tired of what they perceive as woke messaging in their entertainment, you might chip away at your box office.
It's the get woke, go broke theory in action.
Which is always a hotly debated topic. Some say it's a myth created by YouTubers. Others will point to the box office for the Marvels or indie Indiana Jones 5 as proof. The source we're examining firmly believes it's a real factor here. They point out that even massive, beloved brands can suffer financially if they antagonize their core audience.
And looking at the bigger picture, the source concludes from all this that woke is not dead.
That's a key takeaway for them. There was a narrative circulating for a while, especially after some high-profile box office bomb, that the pendulum was swinging back, that Hollywood was getting the message and moving away from these aggressive DEI initiatives because they were losing money.
But this casting, if true, suggests otherwise.
The source argues that this proves the ideology fully entrenched. It's institutionalized in major businesses and studios. They believe it's not going away. It is literally institutionalized, quote the Trent Report direct. They see this as proof that the studios would rather lose some money than abandon the ideology.
It's such a stark contrast of worldviews, isn't it? Richard Roeper sees a movie being cast. The critics see a cultural battleground.
And neither side is backing down. And the critics feel they are fighting for the truth and integrity of art, and the industry, from their perspective, is pushing forward with what it sees as a moral and social imperative.
Well, this has been quite the journey today. We started with a blurry image in a teaser trailer. We moved to ancient Sparta. We took a long detour through Hollywood corporate boardroom, looked at the collapse of The Witcher, and we ended up debating the philosophy of collective guilt and reverse discrimination.
Just another day in the modern culture wars, but it really shows how nothing is simple anymore. Every single piece of media carries all this baggage now.
It really makes you think about how we consume media now. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Every casting choice, every line in a trailer is scrutinized for its political DNA.
It does, and it raises a really difficult question for you, the viewer, a question that goes way beyond just this one movie.
Which is?
If we accept the premise that these quotas and mandates exist, casting directors like Sophie Holland have publicly admitted that they use casting to manipulate bias. At what point does the audience stop viewing a film as art?
Start viewing it as electoral propaganda.
Exactly. Does knowing that a quota might be in play fundamentally change how you watch an actor's performance? Let's say Lupita Nyong'o gives an Oscar-worthy performance, and she is certainly capable of it. She's a fantastic, brilliant actress. Will a significant portion of the audience be unable to see it because they know, or at least suspect, why she was put there in the first place?
Can you truly enjoy the magic trick if you know the magician was forced by the theater owner to use a specific pre-arranged deck of cards?
That is the question you, the listener, need to ask yourself. Does the knowledge of that social engineering, as the source calls it, taint the artistic merit of the final product, regardless of how good it might be on a technical level? Can you separate the art from the man?
A very provocative thought to end on. As always, we encourage you to look closer at the media you consume. Don't just watch the trailer. Look at the context. Look at the arguments on all sides. And decide for yourself what it is you're really seeing.
Knowledge is power, even when it's just about movie cast.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.